I'm not reckless. I'm the guy who brings extra headlamps. That's the part that still irritates me when I think about it. If you looked at what I packed that day, you'd assume I was the careful one. 2 headlamps with fresh batteries, a backup flashlight, printed topo maps in a folder even though I had the route saved on my phone. First aid kit, extra water, spare socks. I did all the right things, except the one that mattered. This was 2017, Mojave Desert, California. Late spring, already hot by mid-morning. I'm not a professional explorer, just a geology hobbyist who spent years reading, hiking, and explaining rocks to people who didn't ask. I like knowing where I am and why it looks the way it does. My friend Wes was the same type, just louder about it. He'd sent me photos of a cave entrance he found online. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal. A known opening people posted about. Our plan was just drive out early, hike in, look around, get back out before the heat got serious. We parked off a dirt road, no other cars, which didn't feel strange. That's the desert. The cave entrance looked exactly like the photos. Just a dark cut in pale rock. No warning signs, no drama. The temperature drop hit as soon as we stepped inside. Outside was oven hot. Inside felt cool. It smelled like dust and minerals. We turned on our headlamps and did what we always do. Pointed out formations, took photos, talked like this was another normal trip. We marked our route with small stone piles. Nothing fancy, just enough to catch the light on the way back. At first, everything matched the story we expected. Then we rounded a bend and saw something that didn't belong. It looked like a rock until Wes stopped and said, "That's cardboard." Flattened, pushed against the wall, still printed. Next to it was a plastic water jug and a candle burned down short, with soot on the stone above it. That wasn't geology gear. Wes laughed, the forced kind. "Guess someone's been hanging out." I said, "Probably hikers, but we were deep enough that you didn't wander in by accident. You had to choose this." We kept going, slower now. Voices sounded too loud in the cave, like they didn't belong to us anymore. Then we found what looked like a sleeping spot. Packed dirt in an oval. A shallow dent shaped like someone had been lying there. Not a quick rest. Something longer. Wes crouched and said, "There aren't any footprints." That's what got me. The floor held prints. We could see our own tracks clearly. But there weren't fresh tracks leading deeper or back out the way we came. I started doing mental math. Side passages, other exits, things we hadn't researched. That gap suddenly felt big. We should have turned around right there. We didn't. We kept moving because neither of us wanted to be the one to overreact. Not long after, I noticed the marks on the wall. A long scrape at about shoulder height dragged through dust and soft stone. Too consistent to be natural. "That's not old," Wes said. That was it. I said, "We're heading back." He didn't argue. On the way out, the sound changed. A soft shuffle behind us. Far enough to question, close enough to notice. Timed wrong, like it responded to us moving. We stopped. Then we heard voices. At least 2. Human. Muffled. Echoing in a way that made distance hard to judge. Short phrases. Pauses. Like people navigating. Not joking. Not laughing. Wes whispered, "Is that?" I didn't answer. I did something stupid. Instinct, I guess. I killed my headlamp for a second. The darkness didn't feel empty. I turned it back on immediately and hated myself for learning that. We moved faster. Behind us, a rock skittered. Neither of us kicked it. The voices stayed behind us, like they didn't need to hurry. When daylight finally showed ahead, it should have felt like relief. Instead, something cut across it. A shape at the mouth of the cave, blocking the glow for a second. Then gone. Wes made this quick, startled sound and almost lost his footing. I could tell he saw it too. We came out hard into the sun. Wind sounded too loud. Everything felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. We walked fast back to the car. The passenger door wasn't fully shut, not latched. We stood there for a second before touching anything. Then I checked inside. Nothing missing. But there was a smear of dust on the passenger window at hand height. like someone leaned in to look. We left fast enough to spin the tires in the dirt. Later, I reported it. Ranger station, non-emergency line. Everyone was polite. Notes were taken. Just that. I understand why. It's the desert. People hide out, people wander. Not every story turns into a search. The cave didn't scare me. What scared me was realizing it never felt empty. Like we were the ones trespassing. This happened in 2017, Ozark National Forest in Arkansas. I was 21, a college freshman, and this was one of those cheap weekend trips where you convince yourself you're outdoorsy because you bought gear once. There were 4 of us, me, Tyler, Chris, and Evan. Nothing extreme planned, just camping, a fire, some drinks, and pretending we weren't thinking about classes for a couple days. We picked a campsite that looked safe on paper. Fire ring, flat ground, trees spaced far enough apart that it didn't feel closed in. The road wasn't far, but once you stepped into the tree line, it felt isolated in that quiet, swallowing way forests have at night. We set up while there was still light. Everything felt normal. Laughing too loud, messing with the tent poles, Tyler trying to split wood like he knew what he was doing, Evan taking photos for social media. The usual. Once it got dark, the fire became the center of everything. Phones were dying, but there wasn't service anyway. Night sounds were normal. Crickets, wind, something moving through brush, nothing that stood out. We were mid-conversation when the whistling started. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't someone trying to sound like a bird. It was clean and steady, like a person casually whistling to themselves. Almost cheerful. It came from beyond the firelight, just past where the trees thickened and the darkness took over. Everyone stopped talking at once. Chris called out, "Hello?" The whistling stopped instantly. We sat there listening. "Dude, it's just some guy messing with us." That's what Tyler said. He meant it to calm everyone down. Like, okay, worst case, it's a bored guy in the woods who wants attention. He wasn't wrong, and that's what made it worse. Because if it was just some guy, then it meant there was someone out there close enough to watch us, confident enough to play with us, and comfortable enough to stay hidden. We tried to pick the conversation back up, but it didn't work. 10 seconds later, the whistling started again. Chris called out louder this time. "Hey!" Again, instant silence. Tyler grabbed a flashlight and pointed it into the trees. The beam hit trunks, branches, floating bugs. Nothing else. The whistling stayed off. He lowered the light. Whistling resumed. He raised it again. Silence. It was so precise it felt unreal, like we were controlling a switch without meaning to. Evan said quietly, "That's not funny." Tyler swept the light side to side. The beam died after a certain distance, like the darkness had a hard edge. As soon as he lowered it, the whistling came back. Slightly repositioned. Not closer exactly, but more targeted, if that makes any sense. Chris said, "He's watching the light." That sentence changed everything, because someone messing with us is annoying. Someone studying how we react is different. We got louder, like volume could build a wall. Tyler kept joking, but even he kept looking toward the trees. The whistling cut in and out depending on where the light was pointed, like it was testing us. Then it moved. Suddenly it was coming from farther to the right, like whoever it was had moved while we were focused elsewhere. Evan asked, "How did he move that fast?" Chris said the thing nobody wanted to hear. There might be more than one. That made everything click. The way the sound seemed to relocate without footsteps, the way it always stayed just outside the beam. One whistles, the other moves. Or neither whistles, and the sound is just bait. We started packing without saying we were leaving. Just doing it. Quietly. The whistling continued in short bursts. Sometimes it didn't start right away and we'd think it was over. Then it came back like a reminder. At one point, the fire popped and dipped for a second, just enough that the circle of light shrank. In that moment, I saw something between two trees, just a vertical shape that didn't match the spacing, like someone had been standing there and leaned back behind a trunk. Tyler's light swung over immediately. Nothing. Just trees. I didn't want to say anything, but Chris looked at me and said, "You saw that too?" I nodded. That was enough. We backed toward the car together. The tents were right there, but none of us wanted thin fabric between us and whatever was out there. A tent suddenly felt useless. As soon as we moved away from the fire, the whistling stopped completely. That silence felt worse. We were halfway to the car when a branch snapped nearby, like really close. Chris spun around with his light and yelled, "Stop!" Nothing answered. We got into the car fast, locked the doors, and Tyler started the engine. We sat there with the headlights blasting into the trees, waiting for something to show itself. Nothing happened. We didn't sleep in the tents. We slept in the car, doors locked, pretending we were just being cautious. But nobody actually slept. Every sound felt too close. Morning came like a reset. In daylight, we walked back to the fire ring expecting to feel stupid. Instead, we saw footprints. Not ours. Different tread, heavier heel. Just a few near the edge of the ring, like someone had stepped close enough to look in. There was also a crushed beer can near one of the rocks. We didn't bring beer. Tyler stared at it and said, "So he was close." We packed up and left without talking much. I've thought about that night a lot since then. The whistling wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was realizing it stopped when it got what it wanted. Back in 2016, I was working days at a warehouse outside town. Long shifts, same routine, nothing special. When the workday ended, the hours stretched out in that way they only do in small towns. Too much time, nowhere to put it. So on weekends, me and a couple friends would drive around until we landed somewhere quiet. That old baseball field was perfect. It had been abandoned for years, but it wasn't fenced off properly. The dugouts were tagged with old graffiti. The bleachers were half broken. The fence had gaps where kids had been cutting through forever. You could park near home plate, shut the headlights off, and it felt like the world ended right there. Beyond the outfield fence, the tree line was thick, real thick. Your headlights didn't reach it. They just stopped. That night, it was me, Kyle, and Aaron. Nothing planned. Just driving, talking trash, windows down, air cooling off. We parked like always, music low, warm soda. Sitting on the bleachers, feet on dusty concrete, talking about work and nothing. Then the conversation died for a second. Not awkward, just quiet. And then we heard a single metal sound, like someone hit the fence once and stopped. Kyle laughed and said, "Probably a deer." Aaron joked about how Indiana deer were built wrong. I didn't laugh. I noticed the timing. The sound came exactly when we went quiet, like it was waiting for that moment. I said, "Yeah, probably." We kept talking, but it didn't settle back in. The noise stayed louder than our voices. Every pause felt stretched. A few minutes passed. Nothing else happened. Then Aaron dared me to walk out to the outfield fence. Kyle pointed, "You're the biggest. Go." I rolled my eyes, but I stood up anyway. That's how it works when you don't want to be the guy who backed down. Walking across the field, the dugout graffiti looked pale under the moon, like old scars. I made it halfway and stopped, because I saw something. It wasn't a full figure stepping out, just a shape, a shoulder, maybe part of a head, tucked behind a tree at the very edge of the woods. It was positioned like it had been there already, waiting for someone to walk far enough away from the others. I stopped there, trying to understand what was going on. The shape didn't move forward. It stepped back. One careful movement, no noise, no crash through leaves. Just gone, like it knew exactly how to disappear. I didn't shout. I didn't want that. I turned around and walked back fast enough to close the distance, slow enough to pretend nothing was wrong. Kyle asked if I touched the fence. I said yes, and went straight to the car. Aaron laughed and called me out for lying. I didn't answer. I just turned my phone flashlight toward the outfield. They followed. 3 weak beams waving across the grass. The light didn't reach the tree line. That's when we heard crunching the leaves. Then a sound that didn't belong at all. A short whistle. Aaron said quietly, "Okay." "Nope." Kyle laughed too loud and said, "Let's go." We piled into the car fast, doors slamming, all of us talking at once like noise could keep the field from listening. I turned the key. Dash lights on. Radio clicked. But the car didn't start. I tried again. Same thing. Everyone went quiet. That's when I looked up. Near the dugout opening, where no one should have been, someone was standing at the edge of the infield dirt. Just standing there facing us. Like, "You see me now." I tried the key again, and the engine finally caught. I didn't ease out. I threw it in reverse, gravel spraying, headlights swinging across the field. The moment the lights hit the dugout, the person wasn't there. We didn't talk about calling anyone. We didn't go back. That was it. For them. For me, it stuck. The way it waited for quiet, the way it didn't chase, the way it positioned itself just to be seen. A couple weeks later, I went back alone in daylight. Not because I was brave, because I was annoyed. I needed to prove it was nothing. The field looked smaller in the sun. I walked straight to the dugout. That's where I found the cigarette butts. Fresh, filters bright, tucked back in the corner like someone had been sitting there. None of us smoked, not one. I stood there staring at them, and the field felt different, like a place someone used because they knew no one would bother them. I left without exploring further. I didn't go near the tree line. Now, when I drive past, I don't look at the field anymore. I look at the woods. We thought we were wasting time. Somebody else was spending it. He only showed up when the sun started going down. That was the rule. I didn't notice it right away, but once I did, I couldn't unsee it. Sunset came, light softened, and there he was, standing on the ridge across the valley like he'd been scheduled. The first time, I didn't panic. I barely reacted at all. I saw a silhouette, registered another hiker, and went back to what I was doing. People hike the Appalachian Trail every day. People stop to watch sunsets. Nothing about that is unusual. What made it unusual was how still he was. I was in Virginia, 2019, doing a short section hike with my friend Jordan. 2 nights, nothing ambitious. We were trying to unplug, not conquer anything. We'd watched enough trail videos to feel prepared, which in hindsight was part of the problem. Our first day was textbook. Warm afternoon, shaded climbs, that good rhythm where your body complains, but your brain stays calm. By late afternoon, we found a decent camp spot. Not official, just a flat area that clearly had hosted tents before. Fire ring, a couple of trees good for hanging a food bag, and a wide opening through the trees that looked out over a valley. Across the valley was a ridge line, far enough away to feel like scenery, not part of our space. It was pretty, easy to ignore. We set up camp on autopilot, filtered water, pitched the tent, argued briefly about how high the bear bag needed to be. Dinner was dehydrated meals and bad jokes. Everything felt normal. As the sky started changing color, Jordan said, "Yo." I followed his finger. On the ridge across the valley, there was a person. Just a dark silhouette against the fading light. Upright, human-shaped, and not moving. I squinted. "Is that a guy?" "Has to be," Jordan said, shrugging like he didn't want to give it importance. I waved without thinking. It was automatic. See a person, acknowledge them. The figure didn't wave back. Jordan called out, "Hey." There was no chance it would carry that far, but it felt the right thing to do, like confirming we were all just people doing normal things. The figure didn't react at all, and not in a maybe he didn't notice way. Nothing about it changed, no shift, no head turn, just stillness. We watched for a minute, then another. The figure stayed exactly where it was. When the light dropped enough that the ridgeline blended into shadow, the silhouette didn't walk away, it just disappeared into darkness. That night, I slept fine. I thought about it, sure, but it didn't feel threatening yet. It was just a strange detail. Trail weirdness. The next morning was normal. Birds, leaves, wind. No signs anyone had been near our camp. Bear bag still tied, gear untouched. If it had ended there, this would have been a forgettable story. But the second night, he came back. Different camp spot. Same valley, same ridgeline. We were setting up dinner when the sky started dimming and I felt my attention drift to the ridge before I consciously chose to look. There he was. Same spot, same stillness. Jordan said, "No way." I pulled out my phone to get a picture. Not because I expected a good one. Phones don't handle distance or dusk, but because I wanted proof. Something that made it feel less subjective. The photo was useless. A smudge on a line. Zooming in made it worse. Jordan tried too. Same result. We kept looking with our eyes because that was the only way it looked real. I waved again, more stubborn than friendly, like I was trying to force the situation into normalcy. But nothing. Jordan shined his headlamp across the valley. The beam died long before it reached the ridge. He said, "Maybe it's a stump." I said, "A stump that only shows up at sunset?" Neither of us laughed. After dark, we noticed little things that didn't quite fit. A rock near the fire ring wasn't where Jordan remembered it. The bear bag rope looked slightly looser, like the knot had been handled. Near the edge of camp, there was a crumpled wrapper that wasn't ours. Each thing had a reasonable explanation. Wind, previous campers, faulty memory. Still, we checked our pockets more than once for our keys. We kept scanning the trees behind us, and I kept thinking about how quiet the ridge had gone. The third evening was the one that broke it. We planned to leave the next morning, so the day was easy. Short hike, minimal effort. We found another spot with the same valley view, and by then it felt like we were testing something. I told myself, if he shows up again, I'm done pretending this is coincidence. The sun wasn't even down when he appeared. There was still color in the trees, still detail in the bark. And there he was, already in position, like he'd arrived early. Jordan said, "He's here already." I stared, trying to force detail out of the shape. Hat, backpack, jacket, anything. Nothing. Just a person-shaped absence. Then I heard a footstep behind us. One step on leaves, close enough that it sounded placed. Jordan turned at the same time I did. There was nothing there, just trees and dark brush. I looked back across the valley. The figure was still on the ridge. That's when it stopped being unsettling and turned into a logic problem. If that silhouette was real and still across the valley, then the sound behind us meant someone else was close. And if the footstep wasn't human, then it was doing a convincing impression of one. Jordan whispered, "There's more than one." We packed without talking. Fast but careful, we didn't want to announce ourselves. I kept looking at the ridge. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. We left at first light. No breakfast. No lingering. We just walked until the trees felt less tight around us. Weeks later, I was deleting photos from my phone when I found the ridge shots again. Still useless. Still blurry. Then I noticed something in a different photo. One Jordan took of me adjusting the bear bag rope. In the background on the near ridge behind us, there was a shape. Not across the valley. Closer. Just a dark vertical line between trees. Too straight to be a trunk. Too placed to be shadow. Zooming in didn't help. It just confirmed it was there. To this day, I keep telling myself it was just a guy on a ridge. It hit me that if I screamed, it would just be noise in the snow. Not in a poetic way. Not in a movie scene way. Just a simple, practical realization that landed hard and stayed there. In 2016, I was working remote IT contracts for a company with equipment scattered across a few isolated sites. They housed me in contractor lodging. Small, functional, built for people who were there to work and then leave. One bedroom, one living area, a kitchen that always smelled like fuel because the generator shed was close. You don't go outside much in places like that unless you have a reason. The cold teaches you efficiency. So does the distance. That night started like most of them. I closed my laptop after a long call, reheated something frozen, and ate standing up. Outside, the snow was falling quietly, the kind that makes everything feel padded. The porch light carved out a small circle of visibility. Past that was darkness and white. The power went out sometime after I got into bed. Out of nowhere, just off, the heater cut. The hum disappeared and the fridge clicked and went quiet. Normally, the generator would kick in after a short delay. I waited for it. It didn't happen. I sat up, annoyed more than anything. Outages weren't rare, but this one felt different because nothing followed it. I grabbed my phone for light and noticed there was no service. That wasn't unusual either, but paired with the outage, it made the house feel suddenly smaller. I walked to the living room window that faced the porch. At first, I saw nothing, just the edge of the railing, the snow collecting on the steps, my own reflection in the glass. Then something moved. Not in the porch light, just beyond it, a shape passing through that thin band where visibility ended. No flashlight, no phone glow, just a person-sized movement. I stood there trying to give it a normal explanation. A coworker, someone lost, someone checking another unit. But if you need help out there, you knock. You make yourself obvious. The shape didn't. It passed out of view and was gone. A minute later, it came back. Closer now, but still just out of view. I turned on my headlamp, then immediately turned it off when the reflection blinded me. Switched to my phone flashlight instead, angling it low so I could see without lighting myself up. The shape disappeared again, then returned. The third time, it stopped near the porch steps, far enough to stay hidden. That's when the thought hit me. If I screamed, it would just be noise in the snow. No neighbors close enough, no traffic, no sound carrying far in that kind of quiet. And with the power out, there was no background noise at all, just silence. I let out a whispered hello without even realizing it. Nothing answered. I checked my phone again. No signal. I tried calling. Nothing. I tried 911 out of instinct. It didn't connect. I pulled on boots and grabbed the heavy flashlight from the kitchen drawer. I hated that I felt better holding it. I stayed away from the window, watching from the side of the room. The shape moved away from the porch, then returned again. Each time it stayed near that same boundary. Never committing, never leaving for good. It felt like waiting. Then I heard the doorknob. Just once. A clean test. Pressure. Release. I didn't move. A few seconds later, there were 2 light taps on the window frame, enough to let me know it was intentional. I backed away, keeping the flashlight pointed low. My mind ran through options I didn't like. Turn on a light or stay dark. Speak or stay silent. Do something or do nothing. I stayed quiet. The shape moved away again, then came back, then left. Time stopped behaving normally. My legs ached from standing still. Every small sound inside the house felt huge. I sat on the hallway floor with my back against the wall, flashlight in my lap, and waited for the sky to change color. When dawn finally came, I opened the door cautiously. Cold air rushed in. The porch steps were empty, but the snow wasn't. Boot prints approached. They stopped just short of the top step, right where someone could stand and listen. Right where someone could look inside without being seen clearly. Then they turned away. Later, when I finally had service again, I asked the property manager if anyone had been around overnight. If there'd been a reason. He replied casually, probably someone checking cabins. Happens sometimes. That explanation didn't help. It made me realize how normal it is out there for people to try doors and how far away help really is when they do. If these stories made you realize how helpless things get when no one can hear you, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare, and let me know which story got under your skin. And before you relax thinking, at least this wouldn't happen at home, Click now to watch 4 really disturbing neighbor stories. Because sometimes the real threat isn't miles away, it's living right next door. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.